This is one of the ways that attachment styles are summarized. There are a lot of different ones. Secure attachment isn't something that only happens for those lucky people who grew up that way. We can have earned secure attachment, which I think is something that kind of evolves and it grows. But most of us are, and one of the other styles is our fallback. Avoidant is low anxiety and high avoidance. That attitude of I don't really care about other people. I'm just taking care of myself. I don't want to feel anxious about anything, so I just push that all over there and I'm just on my own over here. So there's not a lot of anxiety, but there's a lot of avoidance. And it's really hard to connect with us if we're in an avoidant pattern. I'm sure all of us have been on both sides of that to some extent, of wanting to be closer to someone who's kind of backing away from us. And maybe we were doing the opposite with somebody else or at a different time. So, fearful avoidant is the one that's a little bit harder for a lot of us. Anytime we get higher anxiety, it's a little bit harder for us and a little bit harder for other people. So, it's the high anxiety and high avoidance. So, we're not happy being away from other people. We want them close, and yet we also don't want them close. High anxiety and high avoidance. And then the anxious style is high anxiety and low avoidance. So that's somebody who really wants to be close to us, wants a lot of reassurance. If we're feeling kind of shaky, that might be us. We're really wanting to be around people who love us and adore us and who will reassure us. And of course, what's happening is that sometimes when we really need somebody to be there for us and we want some reassurance, we want them to tell us it'll all be okay. That's not something that they can do for us. And it might be because they're also feeling overwhelmed, or maybe they've got an avoidant style. So we're all trying to come into more secure attachment. We're all happier when we're there. I think of these kind of like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. We have a go to, and when we're pretty emotionally regulated, it's not much of a factor. And when we're stressed, it's more of a factor. So it's helpful for us to know our own style, but also then, of course, our friends. This is the inquiry from last week that I wanted to go a little bit more deeply into today. What is your primary attachment style? I think there's a lot of juice if we get really specific. So if you're working with a certain friend or friendship, what is their primary attachment style? So are they quite anxious? Are you quite anxious? Are you avoidant or want to be closer? Or do you feel like you have more of a secure attachment? Maybe most of the time, but not with this friend or something. Broad level, some understanding of your attachment styles. What do you want to change? So if you have somebody that's always wanting reassurance and you don't really feel like you can, or you feel like that's not my job, or I'm getting impatient, I'm losing my compassion with that person, which happens when somebody is really anxious and wanting reassurance. We can happily do that for a while, and sometimes we get to the end of our rope on that too. So, how is this influenced by your two attachment styles, and what exactly, specifically, would you like to change? And these are the broad areas: trust, conflict resolution, emotional support, the amount of independence that you have, that they have, and the amount of vulnerability. How much do you show up and are authentic and vulnerable with this person and they with you? And as you're thinking about or sensing into what you might like to change, the next paragraph has a few examples, but it might not be what it is for you. If they're avoiding you or trying to suffocate you, then how might you work with that? How might you address this in conversation with them? Or is this someone you feel like you can talk to? Or maybe it's somebody who's like, well, it's not my favorite thing about them, but I get it. I'm okay with that. For a couple of minutes to let all of that percolate. And then we'll come to the how can we help each other develop this earned, secure attachment? How could we provide that steadiness for each other? And notice as you're doing this, what's happening in your body. Are you in a fight, flight, freeze? Checking out? Be sure to come back into regulation as we're working with this. There's no time limit here. We can explore this for a while. We don't have to have it all figured out. So if you're noticing that you're checking out or that you're kind of angry, you come back, take your body back into your awareness, breathe a bit. And really to look into, no friendship is perfect. None of us are perfect. We're not always a perfect match. But if this is someone who's important to you, if this is a friend, how might you talk about it and how might you help each other feel more secure in your attachment with each other? Take some time to really maybe visualize the conversation. What exact words might you use? And as you're trying some things out, you might, I don't think that's going to go over with that person. So then, how do I feel about that? What are my options? We can have some clarity around what is our capacity and what is the other person's capacity, like right now and generally. And if you're trying out something in your mind, like sitting down with them and saying, I get it that you're anxious, but I'm kind of feeling overwhelmed. How can we work on this so that we're both okay when we're connecting? And then see how it feels in your body to say that. It's never a good idea to predict what someone else is going to say or mind reading. But in this instance, we're just bringing up some possibilities based on knowing them. What is a likely response? And then can I sit with that? And what is my response to that? And notice if there's any shaming coming in. Sometimes we might have an awareness of, wow, here I've been expecting this person who's really anxious to be reassuring me. Or sometimes it comes into our awareness that we're being kind of selfish. And that often happens when we're in an elevated survival response. We don't have access to our compassion, our kindness as much. So maybe we're looking at that and going, I'm really expecting something about our friendship that's not possible here. And I'm kind of ignoring their side of things. What is it like for them when I continually want them to be reassuring me, for instance? Am I able to be grounded enough that I could read the room better? That I could notice that sometimes that's good and sometimes clearly they're overwhelmed. And I can't really look for support that way. So sometimes when we come into that awareness of being selfish or being objectifying, we might immediately go into a shame response. So don't do that. Just notice, oh, okay, that's a common human way of approaching something or a response. I don't have to shame myself for that. But I could bring it into awareness. I could really notice what effect does that have on our closeness. We're always trying to come back into grounded, regulated, and really present for ourselves and each other. Let's just kind of continue on with that. What is your sense of what the dynamics are, what you'd like to change, and if there are ways that you could really help each other with this? If your body is kind of tight or you're holding your breath, take a deep breath, let it go, see if you can soften your body a bit. And as we're coming towards the end of the inquiry, Let yourself be aware of that, let it come to a close, and notice what you learned about your friendship, possibly about yourself or the other person. Maybe bring a bit of compassion into the situation. Friendships are wonderful and they're hard, and they're especially hard when our nervous system is not as regulated as we might like.